This is important and this is new. The description of the suspect, the Nancy Guthrie suspect, approximately 5'9" to 5'10" tall with an average build. He's wearing a black 25-liter Ozark trail hiker backpack, and the hope is that someone will recognize some of this information.
Take a good, close, hard look at this brand new sketch by Lois Gibson. She's a famous sketch artist. Do you recognize this man?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Do you recognize this man?
That's a yes or no question.
If someone does, and assuming this sketch is accurate, today could be lucky day 13 for Nancy Guthrie, the day Nancy comes home. Now, I want to draw your attention to this poignant image by photographer Brandon Bell. That's Nancy's postbox right in front of her home beside her driveway. Although it's almost Valentine's Day, and Nancy was abducted on February 1st, almost 2 weeks ago, those flowers aren't really flowers of love. Well, they are, but they are really flowers of condolences, flowers of sympathy. But it's through this image that we get a real sense, I feel, of America right now. It's a snapshot of America, vulnerable, wounded, sensitive, but also, well, look at that darkening sky, the skeletal sticks of a tree branch poking into the sky. It's late winter, it's cold and dry in Arizona. It's been a long winter. Someone in the background is trying to walk their dog while the media are gathered as far as the eye can see, gathered around the wreckage of someone's life, the ongoing trauma of a family looking on, this whole question of money for someone's life. And perhaps that isn't even the motive. And then there is this figure standing here by herself. Zoom in and she appears to be quite emotional. She appears even to be crying, which makes one wonder, does this young lady know Nancy? Is she even a relation? And what do you think? Do you think she recognizes this man? I would say no, because if someone did, wouldn't he be in custody by now? Anyway, we will return to this uncomfortable question at the end of this analysis. I want to talk in more detail about the statement the FBI released at the end of day 12. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. By the way, thank you very much to Mayra Cruz A317. Very kind of you. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button and let's get started. So just hours after using digital photographic equipment to scan and map that porch area inside that tent, it took about an hour. That was from about 8:30 to 9:30 yesterday. Well, a couple of hours later, the FBI shared their calculations in this post on X. FBI Phoenix, today the FBI is increasing its reward up to $100,000. Then, new identifying details about the suspect in the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie have been confirmed after a forensic analysis of the doorbell camera footage by the FBI's Operational Technology Division. That was what all that brouhaha inside the tent was about. The suspect is described as a male, approximately 5'9" to 5'10" tall, with an average build. In the video, he's wearing a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker bag. We hope this updated description will help concentrate the public tips. In other words, we hope you're not going to just get tips willy-nilly. Now, as we predicted in the previous video, yesterday morning inside the white tent, the authorities were trying to gauge the height of our perpetrator. And just a few hours later, in this official statement, they gave it to us. 5'9" to 5'10" tall. By the way, can I just say I have been astonished at the lunatics out there who thought that this was a woman. I mean, it really doesn't say much about your powers of observation. What we can see, though, is the authorities have been at pains to try to fine-tune the tips, the thousands of tips that they are receiving. Quantity does no good if there isn't any quality to them. And so by providing the suspect's height, they're able to exclude probably a lot of false alarms. And through that, make that haystack easier to work through in order to find the needle, the tip that really counts in this case. And $100,000 is now on the line. Also, have you seen some guy of average height walking around with this backpack? Black Ozark Trail. Did you possibly sell this backpack recently? Now, besides the evidence, we are starting to see a shift in how people are seeing and thinking about this case. It is starting to take a political turn. According to the New York Times, unlike some other recent major events such as the Charlie Kirk assassination, which I've covered on this channel, or the Epstein files, the Nancy Guthrie case has for the most part not provoked political divisions in social media feeds. In other words, this case might be as popular as it is because it's offering a distraction from the incessant drumbeat of political and other news that may have been exhausting and overwhelming people. But coming back to that original question, do you recognize this man? It should be a very simple question. Either you recognize this man or you don't. But I'm betting many of you looking at this image are already seeing this face through a prism. The prism of your own ideology, your own politics, thinking in terms of whether he is an immigrant or not, whether he is like you or not, how he isn't like you, which is odd because when I first mentioned it, so few of you wanted to see what he saw, his motive, through the same prism, through the prism of ideology. Well, perhaps we're ready to start thinking in that area now. Suddenly, if he's an immigrant, I'm not saying he is, but if you see it that way, well, then his motive is actually irrelevant to you because it's now suddenly subsumed. That whole idea is subsumed by your politics and what you want this to be. And then there's also this.
Before it was public, Savannah called me, because she knows I live here. And then I called the sheriff, and I called the Tucson police chief. So that was, that was mid-afternoon on Sunday.
So if you think there's no political component to this, well, Savannah Guthrie, the first person she called was Senator Mark Kelly, a politician. And there are also rumblings now of political discord at the highest levels in terms of this investigation.
Yeah, I've been hearing that narrative for days, Chris, from investigators here on the ground. Even today, I am told that investigators who are working the case, who are actively working the case, have no idea who is in charge. They don't know if the sheriff is in charge or whether the FBI is in charge. And now this Reuters report just came out, and they are claiming that the local sheriff is withholding key evidence from the FBI.
So we can see politics is also apparent here at the highest levels, where the head of the FBI and Sheriff Nanos aren't really on the same team, if you get my drift. And what is this key evidence that Brian Enton is referring to here?
And that there was a glove that was found inside Nancy Guthrie's home that the FBI asked to test themselves. They wanted to send the glove to Quantico, and Reuters is reporting that instead the sheriff went behind their back and sent the glove to a private lab in Florida.
Huh. So if there are political machinations at the highest level of this case, are there any political machinations at the lowest level, at the ground level, in terms of the perpetrator and the victim here? When I first mentioned it, I wanted to see what he saw, what the perpetrator saw, what his motivation was. And through that same prism, the prism of ideology. But we aren't terribly good at seeing prisms beyond our own. We always want to impose that prism on others. And the same applies to criminals, by the way. They see things, including their victims, through a prism of rigid thinking, unable to consider or appreciate that there are other options, other possibilities, other ways of seeing the same thing. And in that sense, our mindset often holds others captive, and also ourselves. And it's possible that this is what is holding this case captive, that this sort of wrestling match between one side of the investigative team which seems to be at odds with the other side. It's something we also saw in the Ramsey investigation, and look what happened there. So let's hope that that is not going to persist in this case. But isn't that too much to hope for? And is today going to end up being unlucky day 13? Well, time will tell. I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.